okay?
Hey, welcome everybody to the SAC genre love stories for February. We typically do this in February. This is my third year of emceeing the love stories. In the first year, I started off by giving some examples of the 9 words that Greeks have for the word love. There's spiritual love called agape. There's philos, which is familial love. There's storge, which is unconditional love. There's eros, of course, which is more of a sensual, erotic love. There is pragma, which is a long-lasting love. And there are a few others we can talk about as we go through. So at the end of each storyteller, we might throw out some ideas of what kind of love we heard their story relate to us. In the immortal words of Burt Bacharach, I know some of you remember him, the great story songwriter of the 60s and 70s. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. That's the only thing that we sure could use more of. So tonight, I know we're going to get more love through all our tellers, and we're going to get right into this show tonight. I will post up on the chat the list of the tellers so everybody can follow along. There's a particular teller you're going to be looking for. Okay, where is, here we go. All right. So the list of tellers is in the chat right now. We're going to start off with Gloria Jones, followed by Rose Owens, then Bruce Marcus, Poonam Joshi, Aunt Leanne, Meghna Bhatt, and we're going to wrap it up with Neshama Franklin. Let's go ahead and kick it off with our first teller, who is Gloria Jones. She is representing the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. She's a retired school teacher. She's a wife and mother who has 3 wonderful children and 7 lovely, and I highlight that word, grandchildren. She loves art and crafting. The title of her story today is To Seal the Deal. Please join me in giving a warm SAC welcome to Gloria Jones.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. And I trust everyone can hear me okay. Now, I have probably an interesting love story, not particularly romantic, but particular to me. Now, 50 years ago, I'd never heard of a life coach. I mean, other than the people who were coaches for football and basketball, I didn't know coaching. I didn't know that there were thousands and thousands of jobs in this world that possibly could use coaching or help. But somehow, inside, I did know that there was a need, a deep-seated need for someone to aid the jello jiggly comings and goings, starts, stops, hiccups, and hachoos of the workplaces I had witnessed. And I'm here to tell you I have witnessed some wild workplaces. Now, someone dedicated to helping the knotty situations that can ruin the workplace for everyone, this is needed in our world. And if you've ever had a job, well, with more than one person, with you and more than one person, then you know that things can really go awry. I'm going to share the story of Sergeant Pants. Sergeant Pants, you may ask. What was that? Okay. In around 1971, 72, I was a bright-eyed, almost college student, dying to make my way in the world on my own. Now, I was still living with my mother at the time, and we lived in Cincinnati, Ohio. But I needed a job to help with looming college expenses in the fall. And so I applied at all the nearby eateries, small shops in the area. Oh, everywhere I could possibly put in an application, there I was. And finally, I struck pay dirt. I was hired by a fellow named Jerry, who looked a lot like Jerry Lewis, the old comic of the 50s, 60s, 40s, whatever. Anyway, he was a little stockier, but he did resemble him quite a bit. Now, his establishment, Sergeant Pants, that was the name of it, was a clothing store, and it was run by Jerry and his ex-wife, his new wife, and the ex-wife's teenage lover. What could go wrong, you ask? All right, so now for most people, that might have been a screaming red flag. But I was young, desperate for a job, prone to overlooking the obvious, and again, eager for a paycheck. So I signed on. Now, here's the thing. He trucked sand into this little store. It was a little store in a strip mall. And so that man trucked in a dump truck load of sand and covered the whole floor of the whole store with it. And it was his desire to give this place the beach vibe. Now, when you think of Cincinnati, Ohio, I know that the first thing you think of is beach, right? No, wrong. But this was his idea. And he was going to make this store something special. And oh, it was something special, all right. Well, at the time, people were wearing stylish baggies. Those were pants that hugged the hip and then kind of went straight down pipe-like all the way down the leg. And a lot of nice fashions in the store. And so they beckoned the customers in, and they did come in. The store did pretty well. But they also had after hours parties. And the after hours parties took place in the store, always without yours truly. Although I was always invited, I did have the good sense to recognize signals of oncoming debauchery, so I never went. Now, eventually, after working a month or two, I and one of the other employees noticed Jerry's slippery practices with money. And there were often issues with one or more of the owners, crying, fighting, arguing, people leaving in tears and coming back meekly to be reclaimed by the store. It was just a merry-go-round of what's going to happen next. There were firings and rehirings. I mean, it was just on a daily basis. It occurred to me that this might not be the best place for me to work. But now the day that Gary pulled out his gun and chased the shoplifter's car out of the parking lot was pretty much my last straw. I got tired of the craziness and the short checks, unreliable hours, and all kinds of other off-color antics. So I gave Jerry my notice and quit. Now, when I went to pick up my last check, I took a friend with me, a friend named Debbie, and she and I are still good friends. And not too much gets by Debbie. She's a pretty quick study. But earlier in the week, the store had been cheated by someone passing a bad $20 bill. And I was certain that Jerry had taken proper care to make sure that it was turned into the proper authorities or put away somewhere so that he wouldn't be accused of passing bad money. So I went in to get my check, and Jerry happily greeted me. Here, Gloria. Well, okay. I took the money and returned to the car. And I said, Debbie, here, you hold the money while I back out of the parking space. So Debbie screeched, girl, you better back yourself back in there because this is a phony 20. No, he didn't. Thank God for friends. To say the least, I went back into that store and it was an unharmonious departure, but I got my money. All right, if we move on to my college years. Now, I have grown up enough to recognize that a sandy little store run by a motley crew of misfits and shysters might not be a good working environment. So I hitched my wagon to one of the most highfalutin restaurants in the city. High atop of one of Cincinnati's finest buildings, there was a restaurant called the Bankers Club, and I became the salad girl. The hours fit my school schedule and was close to my apartment. Oh, yes, by that time I had an apartment. I had even met the young man whom I would later marry. Now, the Bankers Club was run by Senor, and Senor, the owner of the establishment, was a dashing, handsome fellow from one of the Latin American countries. I do not remember which one now. But anyway, he had a very kingly way, which sometimes would get on your nerves, but it is what it is. You know, you've got a job, oh, you do the best you can. Now, the chef was a good-hearted, good old country boy. He was kind and he did his best to keep everybody happy. But then you add to the mix Mr. Hayes, who was one of the chief cooks. And actually, I will add that Mr. Hayes was the one who taught me how to drink beer. Once I said, Mr. Hayes, I do not like beer. He said, if you want to learn to like beer, then what you have to do is pour it over vanilla ice cream and drink it slowly. And the ice cream will cut the bitterness of the beer and you will love it. And you know what? He was right. To this day, that is how I drink my beer. And let us not forget Willie. Willie never quit making the moves on me and trying to get a kiss every time we had to get anything from the walk-in freezer. And that got old after a while. But there were also the waiters who had their own idiosyncrasies. And actually, you have the makings of workplace disharmony. Now, little disagreements simmered right along with the sauces. Chilled reactions and responses kept the caviar fresh. Now, I managed to stay out of a lot of the mixes and the messes, although by the time I left, I could tell that Senor and the waiters were at ugly odds. According to a friend who kept up with the folks there, it all ended one scary day with Senor and the waiters and everybody battling it out in the elevator from the 30th floor all the way down to the lobby, duking it out. Glad I was gone by the time that happened. Now, I will say this. I ended up marrying that guy. And, you know, all the things that attracted me to him, broad shoulders, narrow hip, nice square jaw, kind heart, and the kind of wisdom seldom seen in someone that age. But what really got me was the way he wanted to work for workplace harmony. It was important to him. And when he worked, and he worked with a lot of people, he made sure that people communicated and got along well and did things to further the work instead of having problems that would hold the work back. And so that was pretty much the thing that sealed the deal for me. I thought, not only is this guy got everything that I love, but he's someone who really wants to work for workplace harmony. Who knew? And so we got married, and as the years went by and he retired, he became a life coach. So now I know what a life coach is. And the life coach for this man, my hubby, is workplace harmony. And he does quite well. You never know what's going to make you fall in love, but that's what sealed the deal for me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Gloria. That was a very interesting story to get to the love of your life to seal the deal. I know Ed woke up when you started talking about the best way to learn how to drink beer. And what I really liked was putting the ice cream on there. That's like a root beer float without the root. So that was pretty good. I like that. But hey, we got pragma from Gloria there. This is long lasting love. We can tell. Still married and going strong. Never underestimate some broad shoulders. Beautiful. And harmonious nature of the workplace. That was beautiful. All right. Our next teller is Rose Owens. She is representing the Do Tell Story Swap group. She has been sharing stories for over 50 years. She adapts traditional folk tales, writes other stories. She has published 3 middle grade fantasy novels, which are available on Amazon.com. The children she has been telling to have lovingly, and I underscore that word, dubbed her the storytelling lady. Yes, this evening she will be sharing her version of The Blue Rose, a folktale from China. Please join me in giving a warm SAC welcome to Rose Owens.
Tonight I share with you the story of the Blue Rose. Long ago and far away, in a province in China, there was an emperor, and he had a daughter. She was as beautiful as the dawn. She was his treasure, his pride, his joy. And as the years crept upon him and his footsteps faltered, he began to worry about what would happen when he was gone and she would have to rule alone. And he said, "It is time for you to get married. I will choose a husband for you." She said, "No, father, no, I want to stay with you." But he was adamant, and she was adamant, and they came to a compromise. He finally said that she could choose one thing one quality that she would want in her future husband. That night she sat in the garden with her old friend, the gardener's son. They'd grown up together, and she said, "If I say that I want him to be kind, he might be ugly or old. If I say I want him to be handsome, he may be cruel." And they finally decided that what they needed was a test. And it should be ambiguous enough that only she could decide if the test had been met. So she went to her father and she said, "Father, I will marry the man who can bring me the blue rose." Now there had been a steady stream of suitors for her hand, but they trickled away. No one could find a blue rose. The merchant's son was determined. He went to a flower vendor and he said, "I will give you a bag of gold if you can bring me a blue rose." But the flower vendor could not find a blue rose. But a bag of gold is not something to be lightly thought of. And so he took a jar and he put blue dye in it. And he took a white rose and he put it in there and he watched as the rose petals turned blue. And he said to the merchant's son, "Now keep it in the water until just before you give it to her." So the merchant's son appeared before the princess. As he entered the courtroom, the throne room, in one hand he held a rose, and on the other hand he cupped it below the stem. And he walked down the pathway. And as he walked down that pathway towards the princess, 3 pendants bounced and jiggled and bounced on his round tummy. And he knelt before the princess and he said, "Princess, choose me. I will give you silks. I will give you jewels for your hair and for your neck. I will bring you exotic foods. Choose me." And she looked at him. His eyes shifted from back and forth, and he could not meet her gaze. And she looked at his hand, and on every pudgy finger there was a gaudy ring. And she looked at his hand, and there was a puddle of blue dye. She said, "I cannot marry you. You have tried to deceive me." And she sent him away. Now there was a warrior, and he thought he might marry the princess. And he went to a neighboring kingdom, and he said to the ruler, "You have a blue rose carved from a sapphire. Give it to me, or I will destroy all of your kingdom." And wanting peace, the ruler gave him the stone rose. And he appeared in the door of the throne room. And he was tall and handsome, and his shoulders were broad. And as he walked down towards the princess, his black leathered surcoat flopped back and forth. His red robe was belted with a white silk belt. and on it was embroidered a gold and black tiger, the symbol, the badge of his military rank. He bent one knee to the princess and he said, "Princess, marry me. I will protect you. I will guard your borders. I will enlarge your borders." And she looked at him, and she looked into his eyes, and they were cold and hard as the rose he held in his hand. And she said, "It is not real. I cannot marry you." And she sent him away. Now, the youngest of the king's advisor had a cunning plan. He went to an artisan and he said, "I want you to make me a bowl with a gold rim and paint a blue rose on the outside." When the bowl was finished, he took it and he put it in a golden box with jewels. And when he appeared in the throne room, he paused at the doorway to be sure that every eye was looking at him. And as he slowly walked down toward the princess, he walked slowly so that everyone could see what a fine emperor he would be. He inclined his head when he reached the princess and said, "Princess, when you marry me, I will be the finest emperor that this kingdom has ever seen. I will." And she stopped him and she said, "But where is the blue rose?" And he took the box and he lifted the lid and he lifted the bowl out and he held it out to her. She said, "Oh, it is beautiful, but it is not real. I cannot marry you." And she sent him away. That night she sat beneath the plum tree in the garden with the gardener's son. She trailed her fingers in the lotus pond. She said, "I cannot marry any of them. I would have someone who is honest and tells me the truth, as you have always done." And she turned and looked at him. She said, "I would have someone who values me for myself, as you have always done. I would have someone who is kind, as you have always been." And she looked at the gardener's son with new eyes. And he smiled. And he said, "Princess, wait for me tomorrow in the blue room at sundown. I will bring you the blue rose." And she waited. And at sundown he came, and in his hand he held a white rose. And he came and he knelt before her. And the rays of the setting sun shone through the stained glass windows in the blue room, and petals of the rose glowed with an iridescent blue glow. And the princess said, "It is the blue rose." And the people said, "No, no, it's a white rose. No, that's the gardener's son." And she said, "My people, let me tell you what I see. I see a man who has always told the truth to me and has been kind. I see someone who values me for myself and not for the position I hold, and has been patient and waited until I could see what was in my heart. And I say it is the blue rose. And if you cannot see it, you are colorblind." And the emperor stood beside his daughter and he said, "If my daughter says it is the blue rose, it is the blue rose." And he took his daughter's hand and he placed it in the hand of the gardener's son. And they were wed. And they lived happily ever after. Not because this storyteller says so, and not because that's the way love stories always end, but because they knew that their happiness was in their hands. And that is the story of the blue rose.
Thank you very much, Rose. Oh, we got some new versions of love in that story. The princess knew who she was. She had what is known as philautia, self-love, and she wasn't going to give that up. And then she had the Ludus with her gardener friend. That is a very playful, flirtatious, friendly love that actually turned into a long-lasting pragma love. So very beautiful. Thank you very much, Rose.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Move on to our third teller, Bruce Marcus. Bruce is a storyteller from the greater Boston, Massachusetts area who has been regaling audiences throughout New England and beyond since 1990 with his lively, original, true life and made-up stories, poems, songs, and recitations. Equally comfortable in rhyme and out, he has been featured at many venues, both live and virtual, including on PBS World's channel Stories from the Stage. Bruce has served for nearly a decade and a half as co-producer, feature coordinator, and frequent host for the long-running weekly Boston area storytelling series, The Story Space. So Bruce is one of our guest speakers from New England area, and that Story Space meets every Tuesday evening on Zoom from 7 to 9 Eastern Time. That would be 4 to 6 p.m. for us here on the West Coast, with opening telling usually followed by a weekly featured teller. He asks you to go check it out. You can Google The Story Space. His story this evening is a slightly skewed take on the Adam and Eve rocky love story. Fun fact, he started the tale in the early 1990s, and after several aborted attempts, finally completed it to his satisfaction during the pandemic. Well, I guess there was a silver lining of the pandemic after all. Bruce finished his story a quarter of a century later. The title of his story is The Battle of Eden. Please join me in giving a warm SAC welcome to Bruce Marcus.
Thank you, Lee. And hi, everybody. Adam, yes, that Adam. Adam was alone and bored, and thus petitioned the good Lord. God, he said, I need a maid, a servant, pet, a household slave, someone who will wash my feet and feed me when it's time to eat, and do the dishes, bear my airs, and mend my, well, fig leaf when it tears. You, who made me who I am, do this for me, if you can. God thought, boy, of all the jerks, this here's Eden, no one works. Looking back to the sixth day, I should have left him lifeless clay. Well, said Adam, speak your mind. Can you make a concubine? Someone who will serve me right and do my bidding day and night? Serve him right, thought God? Why, sure. I'll give him what he asks and more. Sleep, said God, and when you wake, beside you, you will find a mate. I'm not sleepy, Adam said. Give one to me now instead. Fine, said God, if that's your will, I'm happy to oblige. Sit still, 'cause I'm going to carve her, Adam, son, from a rib. So let's choose one. A bison's, Adam said, at least, or maybe from a larger beast. No, God said, that will not do. I'm going to take one out of me? But won't that ache? It might, said God, if you're awake. In that case, Adam said, why, gee, all at once I feel drowsy. And without another peep, he closed his eyes and... And so, while Adam took his rest, God drew 2 ribs from his chest. With these, he played the bones and laughed. Carved scrimshaw and put one back, and with the other fashioned she, whom waking Adam soon would see. Adam woke up from his rest, greeted by 2 naked breasts. So far so good, God, said he. Hey, he heard, there's more to me. A face he noticed then, lovely, but frowning down disdainfully. Wow, said Adam, this is great. You must be my brand new mate, sent to do my chores, I see. But why is it you scowl at me? Having issues with your mood? No, she said, your attitude. You don't look sick, weak, or lame. Who did chores before I came? No one, Adam said, I'm told. I'm only several hours old. But come on, darling, let's not fight. Let's shake hands and start out right. I'm pleased to have you join me here. You may call me Adam, dear. Call me Eve, she said, not dear. Darling, baby, sugar bear, honey pie, or sweetie poo, unless you like that done to you. Before he'd let things slip away, Adam first had this to say. You're here, he said, for servile deeds and to satisfy my needs. God made you at my behest, from a rib from my own chest. There is pain where he has cut. I don't need one more in the butt. Whoa, said Eve. I am your mate, but listen, bub, let's get things straight. I'm not your concubine or slave, your gopher or your chambermaid, your secretary or your cook, your mistress, seamstress, wench, and look, I'm not just some submissive twit. We're equals, pal. Get used to it. The thin smile fled from Adam's face. An angry dark scowl took its place. He told Eve, I was a fool to wish for and get stuck with you? Scrap this mate thing, he then said. I think I'll live alone instead. With that, he turned and stomped away. Eve shrugged and walked the other way. The separation lasted days, then weeks, as more time slipped away. Adam made a cave his home, while Eve walked Eden all alone. They didn't talk or even fight, just hid from one another's sight. This may have well remained their plight, had someone else not seen them fight. Snake knew how the two were mired, for he had witnessed what transpired. Now, this was in the days, you see, when Snake had legs, like you and me. And one day, strolling Eden Street, Snake stopped to sit and rest his feet. Well, he found that he was near the spot where Eve and Adam had just fought, and pondering what happened here, all at once had an idea. God, he said, you listening? We ought to solve this people thing. We need more folks, at least some, or else the human race is run. And God said, I agree with you, but have no notion what to do. This conflict has got me vexed. Snake said, you could invent sex. Brilliant, God said. Thanks. Okay, I'll get started right away. Adam woke up in his cave, greeted by some inner wave. He felt his ribs with cautious care, relieved to find the rest still there. Yet he could tell that God, adept, again changed something while he slept. And where the change was, that was strange, yes, in his loins. He felt that change. He wanted Eve. He craved her now. He wanted her right then, and how. From his stone den he did scurry, tracked her down in a grand hurry, and found her standing so lovely, right before a lush fruit tree. He told her, the time has come for you and I to have some fun. Hold it, Eve said. Stop right there. Come no closer, don't you dare. Of dirt and rank sweat you doth reek like you've not bathed inside a week. Adam bragged, I've never bathed. Eve held him with steady gaze, said, you're unshaven and uncouth, unclean of hair and mind and tooth. Your nails need cleaning and a trim, and your fig leaf right now needs lengthening. Adam, shocked to be rejected, stopped, looked stunned, and then dejected. If I bathe, as you say do, he said, then I shall have you. Have me, Eve said. You are crude. First clean up. That attitude. She then plucked something from the tree. An apple it turned out to be. You want something? Here, have this! And stuffed it into Adam's fist. This time, she turned first and left, leaving Adam quite bereft, and with an apple in his hand. Oh, with a barcode sticker. Even though barcode scanners weren't invented yet, with an apple in his hand. Not exactly what he'd planned. He took a bite, gulped down, and found it lodged in his throat halfway down. He coughed and choked, and though he grappled, never lost that Adam's apple. God, he gasped, are you about? This mate thing just ain't working out. I know, God said. What can I do? I'm afraid she's much too much like you. Or not enough like you, I guess. Either way, son, what a mess. Well, after Adam had slunk home and God thought he was all alone, Snake popped up, stepped from his lair, revealing he'd been listening there. Snake, God said, there's trouble here. Have you any more ideas? Yes, said Snake, oh God above, this time. Why not invent love? Love, God thought. That just might work, and might make Adam less a jerk. And God added that it might also make an awesome theme for Storytelling Association of California's annual February genre stories, too. Adam woke up in his den, sensing something changed again. Neither ribs nor loins. Instead, this change was inside his head. Adam staggered from his cave, squinting in the light of day. He plunged into a nearby stream and swam till he was somewhat clean. Then, spying flowers that grew nearby, he picked some without knowing why. And why, he just could not conceive. He sought and handed them to Eve. Surprised, she took them as he said, like your sweet lips, they are red. Those lips they call me, and your eyes are blue, just like the cloudless skies. Eve said, you doth flatter me. And you've invented poetry. This is better. This, why, all at once, I crave your kiss. She grabbed the back of Adam's head and yanked him to her as she said, come to me, my charming cad. Adam said, this ain't so bad, I guess, this equals thing, but Eve, you are confusing. I guess you are a mystery. And smooth to me you'll never be, Eve said, but I think with patience and with time, things with us might work out fine. She drew him close. They closed their eyes and both let out contented sighs. As toward each other they did lean, a curtain dropped upon this scene. Through a part where the curtain caught, Snake watched what he felt he'd wrought. God, shocked, saw him looking on and said, don't be a peeping Tom. I'd arrest you as a voyeur, had I thought to invent lawyer. Lacking any legal action, God still sought some satisfaction, and so, despite how Snake did beg, promptly, whoop, whoop, removed both his legs. Henceforth, snakes all slither low, too short to peer in any window. And from that day to our own, Men and women share a home. For some it works, while others quit. Some stay, but can't get used to it. But those who tout creation say that Eve and Adam had to stay together and no other way, or we might not be here today. The Battle of Eden. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Yes, we had a whole gamut of love throughout that story. Started with the spiritual love between God and man, quickly fell into erotic love, that sensual love of Eros. Then there was this family concept that Adam and Eve wanted with Philos. Then all of a sudden, Eve had switched and got some obsessive cravings for Adam. So we had mania as well. So very good, Bruce. Thank you very much for sharing that very poetic story of love. And now it looks like we have a lot of participants in our meeting. We've had 3 acts so far. To warm us up, let me go ahead and put the speaking order in the chat one more time for those that have joined us a little bit later. We have 4 more storytellers to go. So welcome everybody to the love stories for this genre this month. Thank you for being here. We have about 27 participants. Let's move right on into our next teller. Our next teller is going to be Poonam Joshi. And she is representing as being a guest storyteller from India. She grew up telling stories to herself, a dreamer, if you will. She believes life is a festival. Celebrate it with stories. Listen to many, tell a few, and write at least one. What great advice is that? She is a passionate storyteller with music and rhythm flowing through her stories, mesmerizing both children and adults. She has performed at various gatherings nationally and internationally. The title of her story this evening is Whispers of Narmada. Please join me in giving a warm SAC welcome to Poonam Joshi.
Thank you, Lee, for the lovely introduction. And thanks to everybody who's present here today evening for all of you as we're joining from different parts of the country. The story that I get to you today is from the heart of India, which is Madhya Pradesh, the central state. And it is a story about the love of Rani Rukmati, the Queen Rukmati, with her King Baz Bahadur. So to make the story a part of me, I'm going to tell the story in first person. So here I begin. Sa re sa ni ni sa a a a. Every morning, I go to the banks of River Narmada and I practice my musical notes, be it the morning raga, the afternoon raga, or the evening raga. That is my favorite place to go, sit there and sing. Because Narmada to me is my mother. She flows there continuously listening to me, whispering to me, and no day goes by when I don't sit here. I was very little when I asked my father, who is my mother? I'd never seen her. I kept insisting. And then one day, my father just pointed towards the river Narmada and said, she is your mother. Since that day, I firmly believed she is my mother. And no day passed by when I didn't go and visit her, at least 2 to 3 times a day. One such morning, when I was sitting and singing, something happened that changed my whole life. As I opened my eyes, I saw a stranger sitting right in front of me. And before I could say something, He started praising my singing, the nuances of my melody, my notes, my pitch. Oh my God, you seem to be knowing a lot about music, I said. He smiled and asked me, didn't you hear me singing alongside? I was confused. You were singing with me, but I thought it was my guru, my teacher, because I practice here every morning. And sometimes I hear the sound of my guru singing with me. So probably I thought it was him. Thank you for singing with me. And as I said this, there was a loud roar. The clouds had suddenly gathered, and there was lightning and thunder. Whenever it rains in the Malwa region, the region where I belong to, the hills, the plains, the rivers, the valleys all start decking themselves for festivities of a marriage. The beautiful valleys, the green trees, they all become a velvety skirt with different flowers studded everywhere. The sky with its floating clouds become the veil, and the river Narmada in all her glory turns into a bride. The birds, the singing of the birds adds to the music of the festivities. And when the first drop of water falls on river Narmada, it breaks out into thousands of diamonds. And then it started pouring. I just held his hand and I started running towards my home. Come inside because you'll get wet. I'll get you a cup of tea. I left him in the room and I went to the kitchen. By the time I returned back to the room, my father was standing with his hands folded right in front of him. The atmosphere had changed. It was all charged up. And before I realized, I heard the gentleman say something. He had asked for my hand in marriage. And before my father could answer, I put my bet forth. I will only marry you if you make palace from where I can see river Narmada every morning. And if I desire to touch the waters of my mother, there should be some pond. He looked at my face, for it was something next to impossible. Narmada, which was a river of the plains getting water to the palace high up on the hillock, was a difficult proposition for those days. And I didn't know that he was the king. He was the emperor of that region, Baz Bahadur. He looked towards me, a stance, a glance, very bright. He said he would be back after a few days, and he returned. The days after this were very restless because I didn't know whether I was waiting for him after that challenge or was it something else. I realized he was the king. He could have taken me against my wish, but there was something in his eyes that told me that he loved me. And as time flew, slowly, I started feeling a change in my heart. I went to my mother, Narmada, and she whispered the same to me. She said, my girl, I think you're in love. Days changed into weeks, weeks into months, and then one fine day, could hear the sound of the horses. And there it was Baz Bahadur. He looked at me and said, I have come to take you. All the promises have been fulfilled. I had no reason to say no because I had asked for what was next to impossible and he had done it all. So I, Brahmin girl, a simple girl, became the queen of Malwa. And with him on a palanquin, on the shoulders of 4 bearers, covered with beautiful curtains of silk and satin, my heart thumping hard, I went to a new way, a path that led me to a lot of uncertainties, knowing nothing, but there was something in his eyes that told me all would be well. By the time I reached Mandu, his kingdom. It was dark, but I still told him I would like to see the river Narmada. He had actually made a pavilion where there were two domes, and from there, up there, I could stand and see my river Narmada flowing silently. And then he showed me Reva Kund, a pool in which the water was brought from the plains through a aqueduct, which was something that was not done before this. A marvel with a deep sense of love in my heart. I knew life has changed forever. And then what happened was just love, love, and love. We were both so engrossed in our lives with the music. We would sing from dawn to dusk, talk about musical notes, write poetry. Baz was a very accomplished writer, and he knew a lot about music. So we would compose music. We forgot about the kingdom. There was nothing that he handled but my love and my company. As they say, that the wheels of good times run very fast, but when there is disaster happening or bad times come very silently. And by the time the news reached me, it was very late. Everybody in the kingdom was unhappy. There was fear lurking everywhere. The army's morale was down. It was low because there was no training, no ammunition, no weapons. The coffers were empty. In this love, I never realized when the king had turned into a lover, a poet, forgetting all about his kingdom. And all this traveled to King Akbar. Akbar wanted to rule the entire country, India. So it was time for him. And he sent his commander, Azam Khan, with his heavy, mighty soldiers, army. And then in that war, just with a little few thousands of soldiers, Baz Bahadur was defeated. He ran away to another nearing state, sending messages to me that he would be back. But he didn't return. Days passed and Azam Khan came into the territory. He walked into our palace. He settled there and sent messages to me that I should go and give myself to him, surrender to him. He wanted to make me his queen. When I could not think of anything, I just asked for 3 days. For I had that hope that Baz Bahadur will return. He would come back to take me along with him. 3 days passed slowly, and by the time it was just a few hours left for those 3 days, I dressed myself up like a bride, just the way I had come to the city of Mandu. I sat down with the instruments, called all the musicians, and for the last time, I sang for my Baz Bahadur. इधर आओ एक बार फिर प्यार कर लें इधर आओ एक बार फिर प्यार कर लें. And then I had no choice but to have the poison and wait for my love in the heavens above. It's been over 5 decades, but even today, I walk the lanes of Mandu. I sing the same songs, waiting for my love to come and meet. And if you ever go to Mandu, just sit by the river Narmada. She's still whispering my stories. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Poonam. Again, we got a lot of different forms of love through that story. Very descriptive language. You took us there. It was very, very beautiful. You talked about some philos, that familial love between you and your father, and then also your mother, the river Narmada. You also were very convicted in your love for who you wanted to marry. So that was philautia, your self-love, that you weren't going to compromise anything. Then we got some more familial love when you fell in love with the person you wanted to marry. And then there was pathos when the king turned to lover of poetry, this passionate, suffering love. And then pragma love, where you took your poison and you're going to spend forever with your true love. That was a very, very nice journey you took us through love. Thank you very much, Poonam.
Thank you so much.
Let's move on to our next teller, who's going to be Aunt Leanne. Aunt Leanne is representing the Storytellers of San Diego. She is a professional storyteller, teaching artist, actor, singer, and a herbalist. She lives in an intergenerational household, so life is absolutely never dull. What better stories to spread in these times than stories of love? How true is that? She is very glad to be part of tonight's illustrious company, and we are equally glad to have her. Title of her story is River Music, a rather quirky Vietnamese tale. Please join me in giving a warm SAC welcome to Aunt Leanne.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was lovely introduction. I'm always so intrigued by the commonalities of story that wind up in an evening like this. I had been looking at story after story of tragic romance, and this one I'm going to share with you is no exception, but somehow for me, it seemed to end more happily than most. There was in Vietnam at that time a fisherman. He had been sick as a child with some sort of disease that left his face disfigured and full of pock marks. And so no woman would marry him. And the men all felt that he was bad luck, and they shunned him as well. But he could fish alone. And so he would go out on his boat to the river, and he had a secret. He played the flute. And when he would play the music on his flute, magic happened. The music was so beautiful that the fish would swim right into his net. As the music would travel over the banks of the river, the trees would grow more lush and strong. If he happened to be in an area where the music could go to the farms, they would give a bigger and more bountiful yield. In that same region, there was the daughter of a king, and he only had the one child. And so, as so often happens in stories like this, he locked her away in a tower to keep her safe until such time as he could find an appropriate suitor for her. She was all alone except for an old maidservant, and she was lonely. But she would sit at the window every evening and listen to the birds' song, and listen to the music of the wind through the leaves, and listen to the music of the river itself. And sometimes her heart would stir and she would sing along. Well, it so happened that the fisherman came to this section of the river near the tower, and he dropped his net and he played his flute. Do, 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 do. And the music went out over the river up to the top of the tower, to the ears of the princess. And the music worked its magic in her heart. And she began to sing along, first just inside, in her heart, and then aloud. Love, don't ever say goodbye. My dress is wet with tears. Don't leave me now. And the fisherman heard the voice, and he rowed closer to the tower and played his flute. And the closer he got to the tower, the more clearly the princess could hear the melody in her heart and sing it through her voice. And although they never saw each other, their hearts spoke and they fell in love. Well, this could not go on. The maidservant caught a glimpse of this old fisherman boat, and she ran down to the river and she explained, "This is your king's only daughter. You must go. You are banished. You must never come here again." But the princess, when she sat in the window, all other music turned to lead in her ears, and she began to waste away without the sound of the flute. And she could not eat, and she took to her bed. And her father, because truly he did love his daughter, he came to find out what was wrong. And when he heard that she was sick for love, he sent out word that the river musician, the flute player, should come back to the tower. And they waited until one day he did. Unfortunately, they had not told the princess who he was when they brought him into her chamber. And she opened her eyes and saw his misshapen, pockmarked face, and she screamed and fainted dead away, breaking the heart of the fisherman. And in order never to scare her again, he ran to the window and jumped out of the window of the tower onto the woods, into the trees that grew along the bank. Well, it was a very, very sad day when the princess awoke and found out what had happened. And she spoke to her father and said, I shall never marry. And the king sent out to all the land anyone who could change his daughter's mind would be found an acceptable suitor. But gentleman after gentleman arrived, and although she saw them all, she refused them. Until the day that a man arrived with a beautifully intricately carved tea set. And he presented it to the princess. And she looked at the teapot and the cups, and on each piece was a picture of a fisherman's boat, of a man in her tower, of a flute and music. And when she poured the tea from her teapot into these beautiful cups, she swore she heard familiar music. Do, 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 do. Where did you get this tea set? And the man said, I am but a wood carver. But when I had heard about you, princess, I went looking everywhere for just the right wood. And when I came to the river and the wood that grew beneath your window, it called to me. And as I carved this tea set, I heard music. And she told him the story that he had carved into the tea set. And he told her everything that was in his heart. And the two of them understood each other through their stories. And although he was not her first love, they did come to have an understanding and then love. And her father granted them permission to marry. And they lived happily for the rest of their lives.
Thank you very much, Aunt Leanne. What a very descriptive and musical story.
Thank
Very
you.
nice. I'm not exactly sure what kind of love that is when you get replacement love, but I think somewhere in that tea set and the wood carving was her true love. So a very interesting story. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's settled in for everybody. We'll move on to our next teller. Next teller is Meghna Bhatt. She is representing the Asian American Storytellers in Action. She is a multidisciplinary storyteller, an interdisciplinary criminology scholar, and a nonprofit consultant based in Sacramento. As a first-generation South Asian immigrant woman, she is dedicated to harnessing the power of storytelling for community building and promoting social justice. In 2022, Meghna received the Seeding Creativity Grant to establish Gulabi Stories, a South Asian healing initiative which showcases true and personal written and oral stories from the South Asian diaspora around healing. She also works as the Immigrant Stories Program Coordinator at Capital Storytelling, where she coaches storytellers for live events. Meghna has performed at various venues, including Capital Storytelling, the Sacramento Storytelling Guild, MN Story Fest, and the Intercultural Reflection of the Arts Festival. Today's story will delve into her unique love for her grandmother and cinema. The title of her story is Bread, Butter, and Bollywood. Please join me in giving a warm SAC welcome to Meghna Bhatt.
Thank you, Lee. Good evening, everyone. So it was the 1980s in the city of Mumbai, India, formerly known as Bombay. And that's where I was born and raised. My world as a middle school kid, I was surrounded by my parents who worked full time, my younger sister, and my paternal grandparents who lived with us. So we were very lucky. We were not only surrounded by one set of grandparents, that's my dad's parents who lived with us, but my maternal grandparents who lived in the same apartment building, but their house was located in the rear, through the rear entrance. So as much as I enjoyed school, to a certain extent, and I also enjoyed, being nurtured and cared by my paternal grandparents, there was something about visiting my maternal grandparents that really got us excited, especially in the evenings, during the holidays, and the weekends. There's something you should know about specifically my maternal grandmom. That's my mom's mom. We called her Pittu Mamama. Mamama means maternal grandmom in my native language, Konkani. She loved wearing saris. She wore glasses. She was about 5 feet 2 inches tall, but she had the most loving smile and gave the best hugs. And one more thing you need to know about her is that she raised 4 children, 2 daughters, 2 sons, my mom being the eldest. And even though they came from a lower middle class, one income household, my grandmom made sure that she would take them to these budgeted, amazing classic films, in the cinema, arts and cultural music festivals, classical Hindustani. So they were exposed to this beautiful world of cinema, arts and culture at a young age. And that also with a modest budget. Back to where I was growing up in Mumbai, in the same building where my grandparents lived. If you walked into my maternal grandparents' home, on the dining table, I promise you, at any time of the day, you would see a loaf of fresh, white, soft bread. You would see a bowl of creamy white butter known as loni in my native language, Konkani, which basically was made at home. And then when you enjoy it with freshly brewed steaming kapi, which is a chicory-based South Indian coffee, I promise you will forget Starbucks and Pete's. But one thing for sure, we children learned how to drink coffee at a young age. Yeah, surprise there. But Pittu Mama and her sister, that's my grand aunt, who stayed with them, would keep everything out on the table the moment they knew their granddaughters are visiting them. We would be, they would assure that we would be fed almost every couple of hours. It didn't matter whether we were hungry or not, but the bread, butter, and the copy was right there. And how could I not be hungry, right? Even if you weren't a coffee person or a bread and butter person, I bet you would have been tempted to have. Anyways, among all this delicious food and, AKA their love language towards us, what made our visits more special, especially my visit more fun, was watching Bollywood Hindi films with Pittu Mamama. She had this collection of VHS cassettes and a VHS player. Yes, a video cassette player, which I am pretty sure many people don't realize from the younger generations. Because it was fun watching with her because, there was no curfew or there was no, they're kind of like after homework, but during holidays and weekends. So it was fun. And just to give you all a heads up, if you're new to Bollywood Indian films, India has many film industries producing many regional language films. But Bollywood Indian films or Hindi films is one of the highest grossing films and originated in the city of Bombay, also Mumbai, right? There's so much of history there. And one more thing you need to know is Pittu Mamama, my maternal grandmom, was known in our family to have this huge crush and deep love and admiration for this Bollywood actor named Amitabh Bachchan. Yes, he was a veteran actor. And again, if you are new to Bollywood cinema, don't you worry. I'm sure you're already Googling on Wikipedia. But Mr. Amitabh Bachchan has been one of the top Bollywood Hindi film veterans. And I don't even know whether I can compare him with Al Pacino or Robert De Niro or Sean Connery of Hollywood. I don't think it would do justice. But in his early films during the 1970s and 80s, I would see him, this 6 feet tall, lanky, handsome man with thick black hair. In some films, he would act as the angry young cop fighting against crime and injustice. In some other films, he would act as a heartbroken, vulnerable son who has been shunned by his parents for being an outlier. And if we were lucky, we would see Amitabh Bachchan as the all-time romantic hero, gazing at his on-screen protagonist, and we falling in love. And it is interesting that I was following my grandmom, Pittu Mamama, like a shadow, right? And another fact that you need to know that once upon a time when I was a baby, Pittu Mamama, my grandmom, used to live in the same neighborhood as Mr. Bachchan in Mumbai, right? So she would take me, her infant grandchild, for walks around Mr. Bachchan's bungalow in Juhu to just get a glimpse of him, just in case she gets to say hi to him. Unfortunately, she was not able to get a glimpse of Mr. Bachchan, coming out and saying hi to his fans. But it was obvious that her beloved granddaughter, that's me, would develop the same crush, the deep love and admiration for Mr. Bachchan, or Big B, as he was known. And so what we did, our tradition was we watched his interviews, concerts, where he danced to his film songs, also behind the scenes documentary footage, along with his movies, again on the VHS. One of the things that we did was we would also get excited to buy our monthly film fare magazine. Now, I'll tell you something about it. It was the only magazine that's highlighted all the updates, the stories, the gossip, interviews of Bollywood actors, actresses, and directors. There was no social media, there was no Instagram, and there was no paparazzi running behind them, following them in the gym and the airport. But this was just simple. They also had photo shoots of our favorite actresses. So my grandmom and I would buy it every month. We would be excited and we would go through all the photos and the pages together. But one year, I think in my middle school, we were excited as our every year annual tradition. We were excited to watch the Filmfare Awards ceremony. That was the only one-stop shop award ceremony to watch Bollywood Indian, film actresses and actors receiving awards. To be honest, in context, now there may be like 6 or 7 of them with zillion sponsors. At that time, there was only one. So you can imagine the excitement and anticipation, waiting to see who would be winning that year. That year, they actually had submitted nomination forms in the Filmfare magazine. So my grandmom and I made this bet, which I don't think my parents knew, but that was a different story. We placed a bet that we both would select our nominations of who would win that year. And whoever would win the most categories that year would get 100 rupees. And do you know what is 100 rupees at that time? It was like winning $1,000 right now. Because, I was in middle school. I really didn't have that much pocket money. But I was so excited to place this bet. This was like a fun secret between my grandmom and me. So we looked forward to it. We made copies of the nomination form. We started selecting individually, like who would win that year, whether it was my favorite actress, Madhuri Dixit with a $1 million smile or her sensational dance moves, or whether it was another action hero, Akshay Kumar. We don't know who it was, and I don't even remember that. But it was the anticipation. It almost felt like we were going to win awards and we were nominated for that. But that year we were excited. And the funny part was that I was so excited about getting the bet. I didn't even think that if I had lost the bet, I didn't have 100 rupees to give it to my grandmom. That's a different story. The day arrived, we kept our coffee, our kapi, our bread, our loni, the butter. We kept all that ready, to accompany watching the Filmfare Awards. We sat, and as the award was going on live and the host was announcing the winners, we kept selecting who won and who did not. And to my pleasant surprise, I actually won the bet by 2 categories. My grandmom was most excited for me, even though she was losing 100 rupees. She was really excited for me. We had such a wonderful time. I didn't feel like going to school the next day because this was on a weekend. As time flew by, I know my grandmom was someone who, kept her word, and she and my grand aunt would often give us blessings in cash. They would give us cash in envelopes for birthdays, for holidays, you name it. So I knew that it is something, that she would give the 100 rupees. I even forgot about it because it was school and homework and back to life, right? Back to school life. The next few weeks, my Pitu Mama had fallen sick and she was hospitalized. And the first time I went to see her at the nursing hospital, I still couldn't believe it was her because she was not the same bubbly, herself. She was not there to give me a hug. And I kept thinking, okay, she'll be back tomorrow. She'll be back day after tomorrow. And unfortunately, in the next few months or a couple of months, her condition worsened and Pitu Mama passed away and she transitioned. For me, as a middle school child, that loss was one of the first, closest, and the most difficult losses I had experienced. I did not know what it was to imagine that bed where she sits, to be empty without her, to come to her place and not see Mr. Amitabh Bachchan's films going back to back on the TV. But there's something I do need to let you know, that even though she passed away, our ancestral gene of whether we love or hate Bollywood films, whether we critique or we enjoy some films, or, even the, how do I say, like balance of love-hate relationship with Amitabh Bachchan too, as a character, as a person, that we continue those traditions. My mom continued those traditions. She's a huge cinephile. My sister and I shared the same excitement about Bollywood films. We remember some senseless song lyrics and we wonder why were we exposed to these 90s song lyrics at that time. But those are fun moments. Those are fun memories. My aunt shares those memories with us. And to be honest, anytime I feel as a South Asian immigrant away from home, I feel lost in the chaos, I feel lost in the stress, I know I can find my comfort, my joy, and my ease, or the love language in bread, butter, and Mr. Bachchan. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much, Meghna. What a taste of India you gave us. That was beautiful. We felt we were there. The love we heard from you, that obsessive love that you have for the bread, the butter, and Bollywood, we got that right away. And then the familial love that you expressed with your paternal grandparents, and especially that special relationship with your maternal grandmother. That was very cool. And then we got a little bit of that erotic love when you started talking about Amitabh Bachchan. And I saw the women in the meeting here kind of swooning. I think I got a little hot too. But let me tell you this Amitabh Bachchan has nothing over the chiseled features of an Ed Lewis. I'll tell you that. So here we go. Thank you for sharing all that with us. Well, here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are coming to the closer of the show tonight. Is going to be our next teller, Neshama Franklin, and she is representing the Contra Costa Tail Spinners. She has been telling ever since she learned to talk. She got her professional start more than 3 decades ago, sharing folk tales in the Fairfax Library where she still works. Then she branched into personal stories and has been performing ever since on stage and via Zoom. She's been a Grand Slam winner for the Moth and 6 Feet Apart Productions. She has appeared on Tell It on Tuesday, the National Storytelling Network, and the Bay Area Storytelling Festival, and The Naked Truth. She has a biweekly radio show on kwmr.org and a weekly blog about books at marincountylibrary.org. Check out her YouTube channel to see what she's been up to. The title of her story tonight is Love, Start to Finish and Beyond. Please join me in giving a warm SAC welcome to Neshama Franklin.
Thank you so much, Lee. And oh, I am just awash with love stories. But here's mine. It wasn't John who got my attention first. It was Ed. Where were we? And how I was 18 years old, and I was working in the registrar's office of Columbia University. Now, it was my first job. I was virtually unemployable. I knew how to type. I had gotten kicked out of college for a full frontal embrace, and also I hadn't finished my papers. So I had to do something. And my mother, who was very ingenious, she hit up an old nanny who had risen in the world and was now working at Columbia. And so she shoehorned me into this job. Now, in the registrar's office came 2 young men mustered out of the army. They had come from south, I guess, to make their fortune in the city, in the Big Apple, in Columbia University. But there they were. And one of them was Ed, and he was from the Deep South, and the other was John, and he was from the Midwest. But in any case, let me tell you what I was doing there. As a transcript clerk, I would stand behind the counter, and desperate students would come up and say, I need my transcript. And I'd say, I'd give them the boilerplate. You could have it in 3 days, give me your money. And they said, I need it yesterday. And I knew all I had to do was go to the file cabinet, pluck it out, go to the Xerox machine, run it off, hand it to them. I subverted the dominant paradigm, and I think things worked a lot better in the registrar's office, and nobody complained. But in any case, with all those trips to the Xerox machine in my peasant blouse with no bra, because you remember burn your bra back then at the late 50s, those 2 young men, they got an eyeful, and it was pretty lively, I would say. Every night after work, we would go to the West End Bar and Grill, which was very close to Columbia, and we'd sit in these high-backed booths, and I would sit next to Ed. Oh, he was just so different. He talked slow and honeyed and not very much. I think he was shy. But across from me, there was John, and he looked like a kind of a corn-fed Midwestern guy, but he was very witty and very surprising and a little combative. So I would lean next to Ed, sopping up the pheromones, but I would be engaged in badinage with John. And so it went. However, Ed got scared of this wild Jewish braless girl, and it turns out that he had a fiancée in Lynchburg, Virginia. So he left, he decamped, and that left me and John like 2 legs of a 3-legged stool, and in order for the stools to stand up, we'd have to kind of lean together, and when we leaned together, the pheromones started to pop. So I was still living at home on Central Park West with my parents, and there John and I were in my parents' taupe living, everything was taupe, the carpet, the furniture, the drapes, and there was this big wing chair, and we kind of lay down behind it as if nobody could see us. And I remember running my hand over his hair. It was curly and thick, and down his broad, high forehead and over his nose, which was kind of lumpier than it looked, but then down to those soft, full lips. And when we kissed, oh man, the pheromones went like crazy. You know what we did? We moved in together. You didn't do this in the late 50s. Oh, shocking. We tried to kind of cover it up because the registrar's office had two entrances. And so he would come on the left-hand side and I would wait a couple of beats, come in on the right-hand side. But everybody knew what was happening. And every time I passed the old nanny's desk, and I have to tell you her name, it was Amelie Sullivan. She was German. She had married the Irish postman. She kept waiting for a letter that never came. But in any case, every time I went back and forth from the counter to the Xerox machine, she would mutter at me. She said, you know, you should get married. It's time to get married. Get married. And so there I was. It was kind of like the German water torture. There I was, John and I. We were at the Palisades, which are it's kind of a cliff above the Hudson River. It's about as nature-filled as what you can find in New York City and Environs is actually in the Bronx. And I said to John, you know, Amelie says we should get married. What do you think? And he said, I don't know. I never even thought of getting married. You want to get married? And out of my mouth came yes. It surprised the hell out of me. It surprised the hell out of him. And at that very moment, my heart seemed to burst out of my chest and plummet down into the Hudson River. And part of it was that, yes, I had been pretty sexually adventuresome, but still, there were many men in the world, and I was going to plight my troth to this one. And yet it was going to happen. My heart came up out of the Hudson, lodged back into my chest, and then the juggernaut of the marriage machine started because my mother had been waiting for this for a long time. And she was not called a manager for nothing. She managed it all. She managed my wedding dress, which was off-white as befit my state, and satin shoes dyed to match. And we got married in that taupe living room. And the person who married us was an ethical culture minister because John was a putative Christian and I was a putative Jew. Neither of us believed. But there we were, standing, me in my off-white dress and him in his pinstriped suit. And I don't know what that minister said, but I could feel the trembling between us. And then he threw back the veil and we had our kiss. Yeah, I actually had a veil. And we were married. Now, what happened after that? We went into my childhood bedroom with what we thought of as the kids, our friends, and we got kind of tipsy. And the grown-ups, those were my parents' friends, they all went into the formal dining room full of Biedermeier furniture and they stuffed their faces. And then I put on, if you can believe it, a going away suit. And we got into my parents' convertible and we drove up to Connecticut, the Fox Hill Inn. My mother had arranged that as well. And the lobby, it was pretty romantic. You know, there was a grand piano tinkling and there was a curved fireplace. And we opened the door of our room and it had twin beds. But, you know, it didn't really make any difference. We had been living together. And thus was the formal beginning of 35 years of a rich, complicated, delicious marriage until, as it says, death did us part. Now, John had an autoimmune disease, but he really was a big, healthy-looking person, except for that thing we called asthma. But at a certain point, it was more than asthma. And we knew it. And we did what preparation we could, a lot of it in silence, because after 35 years, words don't do it when something like that profound happens. However, the medicine didn't work. And so there we were in the ICU. And John was actually on a ventilator. And they were going to give it one more week to see if maybe something miraculous would happen. And my sister was with me. She was supporting me, as it were, emotionally. But it was shift change when the nurses go in to talk to each other, and I had to get out. And we had one of those ridiculous, riotous, ravenous dinners that you have when you still have a body and someone is leaving theirs. And then the nurses came out and they said, "You want to go in?" And I said, "Of course." And my sister, for the first time, she said, you want to come? You want me to come in with you?" And I said, "Yes." And so she came in behind me, and there was John. He was amazingly well fleshed for somebody who was so sick. He kind of looked like a felled Roman statue. And I put my hands on that torso. Now, we had decided that we would unplug him on Friday, the next day, when he could be surrounded by family, as they say. But John always had his own sense of timing. And so as I stood there with my hands on his skin, I felt it. I felt a leap right under my fingers. And I knew that John was signaling me that his soul had separated from his body. And at that moment, my heart, that same heart, leapt out of my chest and flew into the cosmos. I felt both huge and tiny, and then my heart returned to me, and they turned off all the machines, and I realized that John had given me an extraordinary gift, because I had gone from my parents' house to living with him. I had never lived on my own, and he was giving me a second half of life to discover who I was as an independent woman. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Where do I begin? Madam, you made me blush. And then with all these pheromones flying all about with the Eros, and then the Ludus playful love with John, and then John's love turned Eros as well. And then we got 35 rich, complicated, delicious years of marriage with that pragma, that long-lasting love. Thank you very much for that, Nishama. And then the passing of John. And now you get to have what we call the philaudia. You're going to have your self-love, living by yourself. And we're here to support you all the way. What a story. What a gamut of emotions there. I saw the whole audience go from wild exuberance to feeling the pain of a love that's about to end. So thank you very much. That was beautiful. At this point, let's all give a warm round of applause to all of our wonderful tellers tonight. It was a beautiful evening of love. And as I said before, as Burt Bacharach said it so well, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. And we got some sweet love tonight. Let's go ahead, Prakrati, and let's go ahead and highlight all of our tellers, or if you want to do them one at a time, so they can tell us what they would like to promote.
Yeah, I have given spotlight to all early.
Okay, to all
One by one,
of
they
our
can
tellers. Okay, let's go back here to the view. There we go. Perfect. Okay, I was still in gallery. So why don't we start with the order in which we had our storytellers. We'll start with, is Gloria still with us, or did she have to leave? She might
No,
have.
Gloria has left, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Rose is the second one.
So let's go ahead and go then to Rose Owens. Why don't you tell us anything you'd like to tell us about what you're up to and anything you'd like to promote? So you're on mute right now.
we go. Okay, so, well, I'm storytelling. I love to tell stories. It's like casting out a silver web and just silver thread and just pulling people in. It's mesmerizing for me and for audiences. And I like to tell people that you have to have three things in order to have storytelling. You have to have a story, you have to have a storyteller, and you have to have an audience. And that makes the audience very, very important. So we can never underplay the fact of needing to have an audience. And in addition to storytelling, I also write, and I have 3 books. These are my trilogy. This is the Mary Elise trilogy. This is a 10-year-old fairy who has adventures and misadventures, and they're on Amazon. Just thought I would share that. I also have my picture book by Who Was There. It's a picture book for children, and I made these little huggable nativity figures. I love to craft and I love to sew, and I'm currently telling stories and writing.
Right. Thank you very much, Rose. What I loved most about what Rose shared with us is that the children that she tells the story gave her the nickname Storytelling Lady. And
Rose the Story Lady.
yeah, Rose,
That's
the
what they call
storytelling
me.
lady. Yep, Rose the
Rose the
Storytelling
Story Lady.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much, Rose. Let's go ahead and move on to Bruce. Bruce, anything you'd like to tell us?
Okay, Tuesday nights, you will find me online. Well, in California time, I guess it's afternoon, 7 to 9 p.m. here on the East Coast and 4 to 6 p.m. on the left coast. It's the Story Space. This is a weekly gathering of storytellers and listeners that has been going on since 1992. We're now in our 34th year. If any of you knew the late great Brother Blue, he was the founder of this series and the co-founder of this series, and he led it for about 18 years or so, and then a group of us took it over when he was no longer able and joined the ancestors. And
I was
we,
privileged to meet Brother Blue.
pardon?
I said I was privileged to meet the Brother Blue long
Yeah.
time ago.
They broke the mold with Brother Blue, that's for sure. He was a one of a kind, and he really left his series has legs, and it carries on to this day. So we meet for 2 hours. The first hour we have open telling, 8-minute limit. Anybody can throw their name in the hat, and then we have the different featured storyteller every week during the second hour. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of great storytelling, and I would love to see you there. And Prakrati, I sent you little text you can to throw up in the chat, I think, to promote it. And if you don't, I will. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Let's go ahead and move on to Poonam Joshi. Go ahead, Poonam, tell us what you're up to.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. So I'm joining in from India, and it was a beautiful session today. What a lovely stories I heard. One coming from Mumbai, so I can relate quite a lot to Amitabh Bachchan. And Bruce, your story, oh my God, I was laughing throughout the story. I really loved it. What a beautiful way and such poetic way of telling in rhyme and rhythm. I really loved it. And Nishama, your story, it relates to me quite a lot because I also lost my husband 2 years ago. So I know what it is to deal with everything. But yeah, he left me strong. And Rose, you are the beautiful auntie. And I love the story. And Leanne, each one of you, precious stories. Stories are always beautiful. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm also a podcaster. I do a podcast every month for the last 4 years. In fact, Prakriti is along with me in that production. And I have asked her to share the link. We do a podcast called Call of Duty Real Soldiers, Real Stories. And we talk about the Indian Armed Forces because we believe every ordinary soldier lives an extraordinary life. With that thought, we embarked on this journey 4 years ago, and we are still on it. And other than that, I tell stories here in schools and different places, gatherings. And once in a month, that is the last Thursday of every month, that is 4 of us, we do a story circle, a healing circle called the Circle of Love. And it happens India time, 8 o'clock IST. So if anybody wants to join in, I've asked Prakriti, my dear friend, to share the link here or my email. I'm available there. Thank you so much. It was great being part of John Stories SAC. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Poonam, for sharing your story and your information. Okay, let's move on to Aunt Leon.
Putting all of that in the chat as well. That's great. Yes, so thank you. This was really, really lovely. Really lovely. Thank you all so very much. The next big thing for the Storytellers of San Diego that's coming up, if you happen to be in the San Diego area, March 15th, we've got an all-day free festival with workshops and whatnot from 10 to 5 at the Coronado Public Library. And then for the region and including SAC's your annual meeting, we've got our Story Swapping Festival. It's the 39th annual Story Swapping Festival that's going to be held down here in Vista on April 26th. And there'll be more information about that as we go along on storytellersofsandiego.org, and I'm sure on the SAC website and other places as well. But come on down, y'all. Love to see you.
All right. Thank you very much, Aunt Leon. Beautiful. Okay, let's move on to our final teller, which was Neshama Franklin. Neshama.
Well, for some reason, I don't have formal public gigs coming up. You know, they've been pretty regular, but right now I'm in a kind of let's see what's going to happen. But I do go to swaps and I go to slams when it, you know, so I can just keep it moving. I see Bruce all the time because he's so good at that stuff. And I want to recommend to you 6 Feet Apart, with a couple of producers who started in California during the COVID, and they have lovely slams that are lively and relaxed. And on my radio show, I review books, but I always tell a story, and so it keeps going. And I'm just so glad to be in this company. I feel so full and of story tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you to all the tellers for sharing tonight. And
You don't forget Puna, Meghna.
Yeah.
oh yeah, Meghna. Let's go, Meghna. Go ahead, Meghna. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ed. Hi, everyone. It's been such an honor to be in this space. I feel that's why I love storytelling, because it brings communities together, especially in divisive times. And as a first, generation immigrant, I appreciate this community and this opportunity as well. So thank you, Ed. Thank you, Lee, and everybody who is, Rupa, who's recommended me in these spaces too. I'm going to be sharing my website and information about my Gulabi stories and capital storytelling, where I'm proud to be a part of as well. And also, I was honored to represent the Asian American Storytellers in Action today. I've just started attending their group meetings, and it's been a wonderful experience again being part of these safe, beautiful spaces. So thank you again, and I'll put the links in the website. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I love sharing my story today, and I appreciate everybody's stories as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Meghna. All right, Ed, would you like to talk about next month?
Next month's genre is, let's get the exact date. It is March 19th, and the focus is our myths, fables, fairy tales, and fantasy. Right now we have three storytellers, so all you story swap people, start more people. We have room for 4 more tellers.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody who joined tonight. Hope you had a wonderful evening of love. Other than that, I think we're good to adjourn. Thank you very
And
much.
thanks to our MC, Lee,
Woo-hoo!
and our tech host, Pakrati.
Pakrati, yes.
Thank you so
Awesome
much.
job, both of you.
All righty. Okay, see you guys next time.